back. एक बार फिर thank you so much for watching Sunday Brunch from Houston. और ज़ाहिर है हम बातचीत तो कर रहे हैं आप लोगों के साथ, हमारे गेस्ट के साथ भी और बातचीत करनी है. एक बार फिर नंबर यहाँ का दे दूँ आपको, इस स्क्रीन पे भी नज़र आ रहा होगा. It is 855-886-6387 extension 4. That is the magic number if you want to win a prize. And not only that, if you have any questions to ask our guest on our show. और चलते हैं आज के टॉपिक के ऊपर और जो डिस्कशन है. ज़ाहिर है if I'm here we will have a topic. And as you know, the guests we have, they come from different walks of life. But one thing is common about all three guests कि लोग इनके पास तब जाते हैं जब ज़रूरत पड़ती है. They are the ones when you need them, they are there for you and you go to them. और चलते हैं आज के सवाल के ऊपर, the topic that when you come across a situation in which people need help, what can you do? And we'll start off with you कि drugs के बारे में कि बहुत सारे लोग समझते हैं कि drugs हैं कि भाई हमारे बच्चे के साथ ऐसा नहीं हो सकता है, यहाँ पे तो नहीं होता. So what do you have to say about that?
We should keep all of us, all families should keep an open mind. And we should not feel there should not be any ego that no, our child cannot do that. It cannot happen in our family. Anything can happen and there should be open communication. Whenever something happens, we should take immediate help from a professional.
A profession. So what do you think? I mean, that whole theory that हमारे साथ ऐसा नहीं हो सकता है, हमारा बच्चा नहीं कर सकता. What do you all have to say?
I think that's a pretty big mistake because living in denial will never solve a problem. Coming to accept that there might be a problem is the only way you could take a step forward to get that problem resolved. I mean, if a parent thinks that their child cannot do anything wrong, then I mean, they should sit back and think about all the things they did wrong when they were growing up and realize that their kids can be capable of making same mistakes or even bigger mistakes, especially with the resources and access that they have nowadays compared to back when our parents were growing up.
What do you?
Well, I think most young kids actually do experience with drugs. Part of the reason is we're in North America, and here it starts, or it's not like back home in Pakistan that you have to be in a certain circle to be exposed to drugs and all that. Here you're exposed to it at school and from very young ages. So it's all about, it's around us, so might as well accept the problem and, see for itself, just pretty much आपको देखना होगा कि जब तक आप प्रॉब्लम को आइडेंटिफाई नहीं करेंगे you cannot do anything about it. So like he said, living in denial is not really
right. But one thing you said कि in North America में ऐसे होता है. These things, drugs and these things are happening back home too. और ये सोचना कि यहाँ पे खाली होगा चूँकि हम अमेरिका में रह रहे हैं, कनाडा में रह रहे हैं. These things are happening back home too. Even and not just in drugs, even like ये जैसे हमने बात की salary के बारे में. Even back home these things happen, but even here these things happen where you don't know what to do, what rights you have. यहाँ पे सोचते हैं हम लोग कि यहाँ पे आ गए हैं तो हमारे rights ज़्यादा हैं, वहाँ पे इतने नहीं हैं. And you do have that big plus point living here in the U.S. What do you have to say about that?
These things happen everywhere, in colleges and schools.
And it's not your child because that's another thing. And I know we're talking about drugs.
It's the environment.
It's environment. And
exactly.
I think, and then another topic, I know we're talking about, when people need the help, but people think it's not their child. It could be someone's house they're going to. It's not just because you can give a certain space in your home, control a certain environment. Like you said, all this Facebook, Twitter, I'm nothing against that, but you don't know what your kids are doing.
The biggest thing I think parents and everyone in anything you do, communication is important. You have to be able to communicate with your kids, and if you're, for example, in business, you need to be able to communicate with your partners, your employees, your employer. If you don't have that line of communication where you don't try to make that attempt to communicate and get to know the person, your child, and be involved in his or her life, then you're going to face problems and not know and live in that denial. And which is the biggest mistake I think a parent or a business owner or anyone can make is not having communication.
Right, and because I know you do business, I mean that's one of your things, business litigation. And another thing that I've seen when you're going into partnership with family, and again the topic is when you need help, people think कि चलो भाई है तो business कर लिया, बहनोई है, साला है, भाभी है, and they do that. And then it's something important where it's not something you should do when you are in need of it. That is something that should be understood when you're going into business.
Exactly, and what happens is the same way people say, oh, my child cannot do this. They have the same mentality when it comes to when they enter into business with family members. They're like, my family member will not do this. Well, if that was the case, then I wouldn't have the business I do. Most of the time, it is family members. Whenever money gets involved, people tend to start, looking towards the money side and not so much the family side, because then at that point they're looking at what's in the best interest for me and my personal family, not so much my brother, my sister-in-law, my brother-in-law's family. That's why it's important to actually have those, have a contract place, have an operating agreement or shareholder agreement in place, which lays out how the business is going to operate. That way you don't have these issues, or if the issues come up, there's a way to resolve it without having to go through extensive litigation.
Now let me ask you another question. Islamically, do you think a lot of people come to you and say, हमने ये contract करना है, आप करिए, or do you think they stay away from that, thinking कि अल्लाह पे यकीन है कि ये हमारे साथ ऐसा नहीं करेगा?
Actually, nowadays, most people come in and they actually understand that business and family is separate. We've had corporations that we set up where there's like a 5 shareholder group, and each of them knows that 2 of the shareholders are going to be running the company, 3 of them are going to be investing money into it, but they're not going to be operating day to day. But even though they're related, when it comes to the business, we're all equal. It's not about the relationship, it's about the business. And they actually come up with their own ideas, like, this is how we want it run, this is what we want to happen if this happens or if someone passes away, how it's going to be handled. They're actually more open to it now because education is a big factor. They're becoming more educated, that they know that, hey, it's just not about having faith, but it's good to have it written down, because what if someone passes away? What do you do then? So nowadays, actually, we have more people coming in and actually wanting those contracts or operating agreements put in place from the beginning.
From the beginning. And when we're talking about passing away, not that your center comes in mind, but when someone is in the ER, that's when a lot of people realize, oh my God, and of course it goes back to you, where people think, oh my God, now my wife is in the hospital, this is, what do I do? Have I made a will? And do you see a lot of people at that time kind of where they're emotionally upset, but at the same time they can't think straight because they see someone who's so sick? I mean,
True.
on that situation.
Well, going back to the question that what measures should we take for the time when something like that happens, where you need to go to a hospital. There are actually a number of things that you have to have in place. I'll list them all. Number 1 is have a primary care physician, have insurance, medical insurance, and know the locations of all the hospitals that are near you. Have a DNR form signed. It's a do not resuscitate form if you wish to not be resuscitated. And these are things that you have to have in place before you become sick, before you need an ER.
You should have planned that out beforehand.
Exactly.
Before that situation.
You should plan that now while you can. Otherwise, you'll be a burden on. You don't want to be a burden on your family, because they're already dealing with all the issues, still dealing with taking you here and there, finding doctors, financing your situation. So if you have taken care of those things on your own, then you're actually helping out your family, you're helping out your kids, you're helping out your parents if they're old, So having a medical insurance is a must. Knowing close by hospital facilities is a must. There are certain forms like DNR form. It's a form that if you don't want to, because see, यहाँ पे क्या होता है कि when a patient falls sick, उसको ventilator support में, अगर इतना ज़्यादा sick हो चुका है patient कि उसको ventilator support पे रखा गया, patient can be on ventilator support for years, and they're just in a vegetative.
And they never planned it out, so
they're in a vegetative state. They don't want to live like that, because there comes a point कि जहाँ पे quality of life and life, इसको आपको outweigh करना होता है कि which one is more important, whether the kind of life that they're living, not conscious, they're in bed in a vegetative state, or to just let go.
Right.
So जब DNR form signed होता है, do not resuscitate form, उससे ये होता है कि if it's your time to go, it's your time to go. They're not going to resuscitate you.
So why do you think, like the first thing you said was people should have insurance. Now, a lot of South Asians, they don't have insurance. And
It's a must.
and it's a must, because, and I'm sure you've seen in your cases where people don't have insurances and they want to do this or that. But it's important to have insurance, and not only that, have it planned out beforehand. Before, and they can go to a law firm
Exactly.
and have that thing, written out. Because if it's your mom, your dad, even another thing I want to bring up is, because the topic is when you are in need, you go to them. A lot of South Asians, parents, they don't have another person. God forbid something happens to both parents. Where do your kids go? And why do you think people are afraid to think about that? Is it?
I think people just don't think that far ahead. They live in the moment. But I've noticed this in my own business where a lot more parents are coming, and even older parents whose kids are now in college or about to graduate, where they're creating wills and trust, where it's like they understand that they're not going to live forever. How are they going to manage their assets and get, pass them on to their kids, where it's not where they pass away tomorrow in a car accident and now there's a dispute over, who's going to get what property, who's going to get, what business.
Right.
They rather have it laid out before. And also, let's say if their kids are young, for example, my partner, he just who's also my brother, has a 3-month-old daughter. He already has a plan in place where, just in case if him and his wife do pass away, who will take care of his daughter? I mean, that's something you should think of beforehand, because if you don't, then who's going to be there for her?
Of course. And Dr. Shamsi, what do you think? आपको क्या लगता है कि जैसे ये आप drugs के patients को आप देखते हैं, and you've seen them. What do you think about that? कि South Asian community के अंदर, कि what should they do about that?
Actually, one comment I have, that 3 of us are saying the same thing. There should be early intervention. Whether it's a legal matter, that we need some will, or it is some problem in our contract with business matters, or it's a long-term care, acute long-term care we should accept. It is a DNR, do not resuscitate, which means directive to physicians. They are all very important things. The same way, in drug addiction also, it is very important. We should have early intervention, knowledge, and we should go and get it done instead of just, thinking that it cannot happen in our family, and no, it doesn't happen. And what you said earlier, that it happens not only in United States, drug addiction or substance abuse, in all the countries there is a change, and whether it is Pakistan, Bangladesh, or it is India, or it is Ceylon, Afghanistan, everywhere there has been a change, and there is more cases of substance abuse. I'm using the word substance abuse because it's very important. It is not only drug addiction, alcohol addiction, it could be a food addiction. Anything it could be tobacco addiction, anything it could be.
Tobacco addiction. And what you're saying, okay, drugs ke baare mein bhi jaise, and I think we were talking about like media, how that affects it too, social media, a lot of those things. And in our community, what can they do where this time of need will not happen? Meaning, जहाँ पे आपको ज़रूरत पड़ेगी कि जाके आप लेके जा रहे हैं बच्चे को अपने drug rehab center के अंदर. What can they do कि जहाँ पे they can avoid those situations?
As earlier was said, open communication is very important with anybody, whether it is our children, other family members, it is our spouse, very important. We should communicate openly without any inhibition. That this may happen. No, this is the topic we should not talk about. Sex, we should not talk about children. Drugs, we should not talk about children. No, there should be open communication from the earlier age, then there will be less problem.
Right, and that's a big issue, I think, that people don't want to talk about it. चलो इसकी बात नहीं करो, चलो ये कर लो, ये देख लो, वो कर लो. We don't want to talk about these things.
Right.
I think the generation, do you think that the newer generation is more communicating and discussing these things than I think your generation? Do you think it's a big transition?
Yes, there is. Actually, change is good. And you would have seen that those parents or older people who have not changed, they don't communicate properly, they are rigid in their ways. Their children call them or grandchildren call them, they have expiry date. They don't want to use cell phones. I'm giving you an example.
Cell phones, and because I know a lot of people. They're like, they don't know how to use their dish channel, or they don't know how to use their cell phones. And I think parents should educate themselves and kind of understand. If our child is on Facebook, we should know what they're doing. I bet all the kids are like, why is she saying this? But this is for your own safety. और ये चीज़ें बहुत ज़रूरी, I think, in our South Asian community. What do you have to say?
I completely agree. Parents, business partners, employers, employees, you got to have that open communication. And the problem is a lot of times, especially with the South Asian parents, their way of handling a matter is mostly yelling. It's not, let's talk it out. You can't just solve a problem by yelling at it or, telling your kid, you do this, I'm going to do this to you. That's not how it works. You have to go to the core of the problem. Why is your kid doing this? What is it that you're lacking? Because if you don't have that communication, like he said, you can't have inhibition where we're not going to discuss this topic. Because if you don't, then you're going to live in ignorance and the problem will never be solved.
Of course, definitely. We'll talk more about this. Time आ रहा है एक break का, तो break पे जाने वाले हैं हम लोग. और before we go on break, let me give you the number that you see on the screen. It is 855-886-6387 extension 4. सवाल तो दे दूं आप लोगों को. It is, what is the name of TVOne Ramzan program featuring Faisal Qureshi? एक बार फिर, let me repeat the question. It is, what is the name of TVOne Ramzan program featuring Faisal Qureshi? और आप क्या जीतेंगे? You will win a product from Honey Derm. It's going to be a skin cream. Honey Derm के बारे में बता दूं आप लोगों को. It's organic. It's all natural products. They are available only online. तो आप स्टोर में जाएंगे, वहाँ पे आपको products नहीं मिलेंगे. You have to go online and get them. और जो products हैं शहद से बने हुए हैं. Dr. Musa is the owner and you can call them for a free consultation. Anyway, कहीं मत जाइएगा. We'll be right back on Sunday Brunch from Houston.